Today we are looking at a piece of work submitted by Minerva Duke for an assignment on color theory, and we're going to look at the pieces submitted. They were asked to submit three developmental stages of the idea for the composition, and along with the finished piece. So this is the first stage of the sketch. That's the second stage, and that is the final composition. So we're going to look quickly at the different stages, have some brief remarks, and then we're going to take the time to look at the final piece in detail. One of the first things that jumps out at me, and it shouldn't be, is that crease in the center there. Here. That takes away from the quality of your work, and you don't want to ever make that practice in anything that you're doing when it comes to submitting your work for assessment. And by extension, these photographs can also be used as portfolio pieces, and you don't want to have work of that standard. It takes away from your work. Okay, so please ensure that in future you avoid that happening. You have the basic line sketch in terms of the outline and plan of your idea, and I can see what's happening there. Nothing much to say about that. It's a good start, and then you would have moved to the second stage of the development, and this is where you start to block in your colors and that sort of thing. So interesting so far, and then we go to the final stage, which is where we're going to spend most of the time. One of the things that I like about the composition is the fact that you'd have taken some influence from history, the Last Supper, and you would have placed the setting of this particular painting within that context. One cannot tell but think of that. If you're familiar with the Last Supper, you right away you start making that mental comparison in your mind, and it's not a bad thing, it's a good thing. It shows that you're thinking. You can see the way your frontline workers are organized within a composition space, and the main individual, maybe this is a surgeon general or the person who's in charge of overseeing what's going on with the present situation. And I like the way you would have utilized that square, that rectangular, sketchy kind of shape at the back there to bring additional focus to the central figure. And again, when you go back to the Last Supper, you remember the open window or the open door that was behind Jesus, to really bring attention to the composition, letting you know that, hey, this is the person who's in charge and who's going to call the shot. So I really like how you'd have done that. That's commendable. What I also like is your choice of colors that we can associate with the medical field, especially in the head covers that the frontline workers are wearing. That blue, and the simplistic approach to it is very commendable. I also like the way you would have utilized the mask. There's a certain rhythm and contrast that is happening in terms of how the faces and the heads, if you trace my mouse there, are flowing in the composition. That's pretty interesting. What is also interesting too is the way you would have positioned the head of the frontline workers so that you get a mask in different viewpoints. That also adds to the interest of the composition, so that's commendable. The way you would have used your brush strokes on the fabric of the outfits of the frontline workers is also really adds to the dynamics of the composition. If we take a closer look at that, you can really see how the simplistic approach with simple values and bold brush strokes really adds to that dynamic nature of the composition. The fact that you would have choose to not focus too much on the facial features as well really adds to the dynamics of the composition. I think that's interesting. You don't have to necessarily see the features, but we get to understand what is going on. There's a nice little conversation within a conversation, kind of a thing happening here based on how you put these three workers close together. And we can see some dynamic stuff also happening on this side of the composition based on how you organize the figures. So it's not everybody's paying a rapt attention to what is happening here. Some persons look like they were off in their own little group discussion or their own individual thoughts, and that adds to the dynamic of the composition. What I also really appreciate is the way you would have utilized this particular figure here, this standing figure here, which puts your composition in a totally different light. It almost seems, even though we're not seeing the legs of the others, it seems like most of them are seated with the exception of this one and this one, probably this one as well. But the way you position this one, that bent over position, and the fact that there's a paper in front here suggests that maybe this is an important point this he or she is about to make, or he or she is striving to capture the attention of the main person, or the table, so to speak, the panel of the table. But definitely, and the fact that you have used a different contrast in terms of the skin tone also says a lot in terms of how effective you were with using your composition and the objects in your composition to really get the message across. So that's pretty commendable. Some of the things I think you could have worked on to improve would be your values. You know, because if this figure is standing in front here and we're looking at the greens on all of the front-end workers who are wearing greens, I would like to think that the ones who are closer, as in this one and this one, that the value could have been a little more, could have brought these front-line workers more into the foreground based on how you use the values, and let these ones there be receded, because even though we look at the position of the table and the distance from here to here, it could be about 5-6 feet. Your colors should be able to speak to that when you're painting. You need to pay attention to that. When we look at the tablecloth as well, even though we get the sense of the three-dimensionality, the top and the bottom, based on the way you would have used your shadows here, it is my opinion that you could have also done some stuff with the values on this part, the light values here, that would have made it a little more richer. Maybe add some yellows to bring it a little more forward, so that we can tell you, we can sense that this, if you were looking into the composition, this is the first thing that you come in contact with, and then you move to the central speaker. So that's definitely something you could have looked at from a tonal perspective. I really don't like the way you treat the floor. I don't know if these are tiles, but it just looked like an afterthought when we look at it. If you zoom into, take a closer look at that. I mean, look at that. If you're emphasizing that one point perspective, which is what was done in the Last Supper, the way your lines are flowing, you could have done a much better job at that. These lines could have been so much better. That just looked like an afterthought. And the dangers of doing that in your composition is that it sometimes takes away and becomes a distraction from all the good work that you would have done in the other areas of the composition. So please ensure that in future, when you're working, you pay attention to all different aspects of your composition, so that they tie together. Even if they are not the dominant or the focal point, it doesn't mean that they should be treated in a shabby way, for want of a better word. And I feel that looking at the way you would have worked on the floor, the way you draw the lines to indicate the tiles, I mean, you could have been better off just leave those out, to be honest, because as it is right now, you're leaving so much contradiction. Because if we were to trace that line there, that's going to go till there, but this one is going to go over there, and one point perspective don't deal like that. This one is going in a different direction. See what I mean? So those are little things that you need to pay attention to. On the table, the papers and or the documents and the devices, or these bottles, I'm struggling to really make a deliberate connection in terms of what are you striving to say. Are these those little bottles that are usually, when you go to the doctor, that you usually see them having the vaccine or the content of the stuff that goes into the syringe in? Because if I'm looking at that, the cap don't suggest that, or the head of the bottle is not suggesting that. And is that what you're striving to explain? And since we're dealing with a virus, and one of the main deterrent to this virus is to find a vaccine that is going to cure or prevent the virus from spreading further, then I'm thinking the use of these bottles should have been those bottles that represent the content that goes into the syringe. In this case, the actual vaccine that is going to go into the syringe that is going to be injected into to infected persons. So I think, again, this here represents a lapse in terms of your attention to detail. Every object that you put in your composition must assist in sending the message that you're striving to get over to your viewing public. And when you have contradictory things, or not contradictory, ambiguous images like these, then it leaves a lot to be desired. Now, you can explain to me and say exactly what these are, but I'm just basing it based on what I'm seeing. So I stand corrected. But definitely, I feel it's something that you could have been a little more stronger with. You could have probably maybe even have a syringe somewhere on the table there, because I'm not seeing any syringe. Because remember, the syringe is an integral part of the vaccine. Because remember, it's not a tablet now, it's a vaccine. So the syringe is integral. So you should have, in my opinion, you should have had a syringe somewhere there to really add to the essence of what's happening. I feel also you could have done a little bit more with the faces to make, even though you didn't put the details, work around the tones to show a little more three-dimensionality. It's not a biggie, but I'm thinking, if you would have done that, you could have done a little bit more. For example, the way you would have treated those cast shadow on the chin of most of the frontline workers. You could have done something on the sides of the face to give us an idea in terms of where the light is coming from. But again, like I said, it's not important, but I feel that it's something that if it would have been added, if you would have added it, it would have add something a little bit more to the composition. I spoke about the different position that you had the heads of the frontline workers and the kind of the groupings that you would have had them organizing. What I like too is the way when you can trace that line, that contour lines, you have that nice dynamic stuff happening there in terms of the up and down of the positions of the figures, and that really adds to the dynamic of the overall composition. The way you'd have treated the background here in terms of the walls also allows us to focus on what's going on with the composition. I think what you could have done a little bit more is around here, the way you would have had this light, this warm wash there. If you could have added a little bit around this entire area and leave this area in here white, that would have really add more focus on this central figure. But because you have so much white happening in here, to me it takes away a little bit from the composition. So that's something that you could play around with, because I'm pretty sure that you can make some adjustments. It's something that you should probably look at and see if it makes a difference in your composition. But overall, I think it's commendable composition. It shows that you're thinking. I can see your painterly style developing with each additional piece that you submit, so that's a plus. Please ensure you continue to focus on developing your own mode of expression that you're comfortable with, so persons can recognize it anywhere they see. And I hope that when you listen to this critique, that there's something that you'll be able to take away from it that will assist you to really improve the overall work, the overall quality of the work that you're going to produce and submit for the rest of this semester. So thank you for sharing, and enjoy the rest of the day.